What happens when Hollywood royalty and daytime TV royalty go head-to-head, and the cameras don't cut away? Denzel Washington just got kicked off The View after a fiery, no-holds-barred clash with Whoopi Goldberg that left the audience stunned, and the internet in flames. Before we dive into the moment that tore daytime TV wide open, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe how far this went. Denzel Washington was kicked off The View after a heated, no-holds-barred exchange with Whoopi Goldberg. That is not a headline. From a satire site, that actually happened. It happened live, with cameras rolling and no one stepping in to stop it. This was not a PR stunt. This was not part of a carefully crafted media plan. This was Denzel Washington, raw, unfiltered, and completely done with playing nice. The kind of moment where the air in the room shifts, and everyone watching knows something real is happening, no? Cue cards. No polite smiles. Just truth, tension, and two icons going head-to-head over what it means to have a platform. And what happens when you finally say what you really think? By the time it was over, people in the studio were stunned. Viewers at home were frozen. Social media was already on fire. You could feel it. Something changed in that room. Nobody was the same after. Denzel Washington was booked to appear on The View to talk about his latest film. It was a project he had poured his heart into, one he had been working on for over a decade. This was not just another movie. It was personal. The film focused on systemic injustice and the way communities are shaped by the policies and power structures around them. It was bold, unflinching, and meant to challenge people. The audience knew this was a big deal. The energy in Studio 1A was electric. There was a standing ovation before Denzel even said a word. Phones were already in the air, capturing every moment. People were smiling, clapping, and ready to see the Denzel they knew. The calm, thoughtful actor, with the easy charm and smooth delivery. At first, everything looked normal. The hosts were upbeat, the crowd was buzzing. Denzel walked out with that signature presence, strong and composed. He sat down, adjusted his mic, and nodded to the panel. But something felt off, not on the surface, but underneath. There was a tension in the air, quiet but heavy. The kind of feeling you only notice when you stop smiling and start paying attention. Maybe it was the weight of the film's message. Maybe it was what the panel planned to ask. Or maybe Denzel was carrying something into that studio he was no longer willing to keep quiet. If you have not subscribed yet, this is the time to do it. Because what happens next is not just a headline. It is a moment that will spark real conversations long after the cameras cut. The interview started the way most do. Light banter. A quick compliment on Denzel's legacy. Then Whoopi leaned forward, her voice steady, but her eyes sharper than usual. She asked, "Your new film tackles some pretty heavy topics. Social justice, police reform. Some critics say you are using your platform to push a political agenda instead of just telling a story. What do you say to that?"
Oh.
The room got quieter. Not silent yet, but you could feel something shift. Denzel looked at her for a long moment. He did not smile. He did not nod. Just said, calm and clear, "I have been making films for over 40 years. Every story worth telling has something to say about the human condition. If that makes people uncomfortable, maybe they need to ask themselves why." There was a pause. The audience stopped clapping. A few people glanced at each other. The tone had changed. This was not a press tour answer. This was not a polished quote for headlines. It was the first sign that this interview was heading somewhere very different. The other panelists looked unsure. Joy Behar raised her eyebrows. Sunny Hostin sat back a little. Whoopi gave a small smile, but it felt tight. You could see it. Denzel was not here to play the game. He was not going to soften his message to make it easier to digest. Denzel sat still, eyes forward. He was not angry, but there was a weight in his voice that made the words land harder. This was no longer about promoting a movie. It was about something deeper, something personal, and in that moment, everyone watching knew. This was not going to be a typical morning show interview. The energy had shifted, and there was no going back. Joy Behar leaned forward next. Her voice was lighter, but the words carried weight. She said, "Do you not think, as an entertainer, there is a responsibility to stay neutral? Especially with how divided the country is right now." Denzel turned to her slowly. His expression stayed calm, but his eyes were sharper now. He let the question sit for a second, then answered in a steady, deliberate voice. "Neutral?" he said. "You want me to be neutral about injustice? About watching young black men get gunned down in the street? About families torn apart by a system that was never built to protect them?" His voice started to rise, not yelling, but full of force. "There is nothing neutral about watching your community suffer while people in safe studios debate whether speaking truth is too political." The energy in the room changed again. This was not just tension now. It was confrontation. Denzel shifted in his seat, sat forward. His posture matched his tone. He was leaning into it, not backing away. Joy blinked. She looked like she wanted to respond, but the momentum had already moved past her. The other panelists stayed quiet. The audience held their breath. Phones were still recording, but nobody was smiling anymore. Denzel's voice was clear and cutting. "Neutral is what people ask for when they do not want to be uncomfortable. Neutral is a mask people wear so they can say nothing while pretending it means something." He looked from one face to the next. He was not angry just for himself. He was speaking for something bigger. Everyone in that room could feel it. This was not a movie star giving a hot take. This was a man who had seen too much, stayed quiet too long, and was done pretending this was just another press stop. Whoopi's tone changed. The warmth was gone. Her words were measured, but there was a clear edge behind them. She said, "Denzel, you have a platform. People listen to you. You cannot be reckless with that kind of reach." Denzel did not flinch. He turned toward her. Fully now, eyes locked on hers. His voice dropped just slightly, but that made it hit harder. "Irresponsible?" he asked. "You want to talk about irresponsible? Irresponsible is sitting in comfort while people die. Irresponsible is watching injustice from a safe distance and saying nothing because it might mess with your brand." The studio went silent. You could feel it. Even the hum of background movement stopped. The kind of stillness that happens when no one is sure what will happen next. Denzel leaned in a little more. His face was calm, but there was no mistaking the fire behind his words. "I have been to too many funerals. I've stood next to too many mothers who will never see their sons again. And you want to sit here and talk to me about being careful?" The cameras stayed wide at first, then started cutting between faces. Joy looked stunned. Sunny had her arms crossed, frozen. Ana Navarro was stiff, her lips pressed tight. The energy on that set was no longer controlled. It was raw and real. Whoopi sat back slightly, then straightened again. Her eyes were locked on Denzel, but her face was harder now. She was not backing down. The moment had shifted from disagreement to full-on confrontation. The audience was still completely quiet. No laughter, no clapping. Nothing but eyes wide and phones recording. This was not the kind of conversation people were used to seeing on morning TV. It was tense, it was sharp, and it was not over. Denzel had stopped being a guest. He was now holding court, and everyone in that room knew they were in the middle of something that would not be forgotten. Denzel stayed locked in, eyes focused, voice calm, but tighter now. You could see something shift in his face. He was no longer speaking to the panel. He was speaking from experience, from years of fighting battles that most people never saw. He said, "You want to talk about responsibility, Whoopi? Let me tell you something. While you were making Sister Act, I was getting death threats for playing Malcolm X. I was being told by studios that I was too dangerous. It's too black. It's too political." Whoopi's face changed. At first it was confusion. Then it moved to something closer to anger. I could see she was caught off guard. The words hit harder than she expected. This was not just disagreement anymore. It was personal. Denzel kept going. I was being blacklisted behind closed doors because I refused to play thugs. Refused to take the roles they saved for us. The ones where we die in the second act to make the white lead look noble. I turned down millions because I would not sell out my dignity. The panel was still. No one jumped in. No one interrupted. The room had frozen again, but this time the silence felt heavier. Like everyone understood they were hearing something. He had carried for a long time. He looked back at Whoopi and said, "You think I am being reckless? I've been walking a tightrope for 4 decades, saying no to the money, saying no to the roles that make us look small. While you were out here winning awards for being safe, I was taking the heat for being real." That line landed hard. You could see it hit her. Bea leaned back slightly, her jaw tight, eyes locked on him. There was no smile now, no cushion. Left in the exchange, this was 2 people who had spent their lives in the same fight, but on very different sides of it. And neither one was backing down. Whoopi had heard enough. Her voice rose, louder than before, and there was no filter now. She said, "You think you are the only one who has fought, the only one who has taken risks. Some of us have been putting our careers on the line for decades, Denzel. We were speaking up when you were still trying to get into the room. You act like you invented activism." Denzel stayed still. His face did not move. But Whoopi was not. Finished. She stood up slightly from her chair and said, Tell us more about how you are the real revolutionary while the rest of us are. Just house Negroes, making the master feel comfortable." The room stopped breathing. There was an audible gasp from the audience. You could hear people shift in their seats. Someone in the back whispered, "Did she just say that?" The camera stayed wide for a second, like it was not sure where to go. Then it cut to the panel. Frozen, silent. Denzel did not flinch. He let the moment sit. Then he said quietly, "You said it, Whoopi. I did not." He leaned forward just slightly, voice steady. "And the fact that you reached for that phrase tells me everything I need to know about how you really see this conversation." There was panic behind the cameras now, producers gesturing, someone trying to signal for a break. But nobody on set moved. Nobody dared cut the feed. This was live. This was real. Denzel looked right at Whoopi. "You think I am judging you? I am not. I am judging the silence, the comfort, performance. The idea that having a seat at the table means the table is fair." Whoopi looked away for a second, then back. Her face was tight, her breathing sharp, but she said nothing, because in that moment, there was nothing left to say. The tension was hanging in the air like thick smoke. Sunny Hostin tried to speak. Her voice soft, almost hopeful. She said, "Maybe we all need to take a breath. There are different ways to fight for change." Denzel turned toward her, but his expression stayed firm. He shook his head once, slowly. "No, let us not take a breath. That is what always happens when things get uncomfortable. We smooth it over and pretend it was just a misunderstanding." He stood up, calm and steady. No rush, no drama. Just a man who had said what he came to say. He reached for the mic, clipped to his shirt, and began to unhook it. His fingers moved with purpose. His voice stayed low, but the words carried. "Truth does not care about ratings," he said. "Does not care about format, or sponsors, or whose name is on the coffee mug." He turned to Whoopi. She was sitting still, her face unreadable. Denzel looked her straight in the eye and said, "I hope someday you remember who you used to be." Before being accepted felt more important than being honest. The panel did not speak. The producers behind the cameras did not move. The studio audience sat in absolute silence, unsure whether they had just witnessed a meltdown or a moment of truth. Denzel placed the mic on the table. He nodded once, not to anyone in particular, and walked off the set without another word. No one clapped. No one spoke. Just silence. Long and heavy, the kind that follows something real. After Denzel walked off the set, the studio did not move. For a few seconds, it felt like time had stopped. Whoopi sat there, staring at the spot where he had just been. Her hands were on the table, but they were trembling slightly. She stood up, then sat back down, then stood again. Her pacing was tight, restless. You could see the emotion building. In her face, the panelists looked stunned. Joy stared at the table, not saying a word. Sunny glanced toward the cameras, then back at Whoopi, unsure whether to speak or stay silent. Anna Navarro reached for her coffee cup, then set it down without drinking. Behind the cameras, the crew was scrambling. Someone was trying to get a producer on headset. Someone else was waving toward the booth, but the show did not cut to commercial. The feed kept rolling. The control room had no idea whether to end the segment or let it play out. And through it all, nobody said a thing. Not really. No jokes, no wrap-up lines, just tension. Just the weight of what had happened sitting heavy in the room. It was not just awkward. It was something deeper. It was the fallout from a conversation that had gone way past anyone's comfort zone, and nobody knew how to bring it back. This was not just an argument. This was a cultural reckoning, and everyone watching knew it. What happened on that set was bigger than Denzel Washington. Bigger than Whoopi Goldberg? It was not just a fight between two public figures. It was a collision between two worldviews. On one side, you had performance. The idea that change comes slowly. That you protect your seat at the table so you can influence things from within. That you stay polished, careful, and strategic. On the other side, you had purpose. The belief that truth should not be softened. That if something is wrong, you say it, no matter the cost. Even if it makes people uncomfortable, especially then. Denzel came into that room with fire in his chest, not to sell a film, but to push back on comfort culture. He forced a space that is usually safe and familiar to face something sharp and raw. And when he refused to make it easy, it cracked the whole show wide open. This moment showed what happens when radical honesty enters a space built on polite debate. It showed the cost of real truth on live television, the looks on the panelists' faces, the silence from the audience, the scrambling behind the scenes. It all said the same thing. No one was ready for it because this was not just about who said what, it was about a deeper divide between those who are trying to work the system and those who are done pretending. The system can be worked. Between visibility and vulnerability. Between reputation and reality. That was the real conversation. And it shook the room. This moment will be dissected for years to come. People will argue about who was right and who went too far. It will be compared to other big blow-ups on live television, but this was not just about drama. This was different. It was raw, it was personal, and it pulled back the curtain on what it really means to speak your truth. When the cameras are rolling, Denzel did not raise his voice to shock. He raised it to be heard, whether you agree with him or not. He forced a conversation that many people have been avoiding for a long time. So the real question now is this. Was Denzel out of line? Or did he just say what needed to be said? This confrontation hit you as hard as it hit that studio. Hit that subscribe button. Tell us in the comments, was Denzel right to call out what he saw as complacency? Or did he cross a line that should not have been crossed? Let us know what you think, because this one is not going away.